Hello, school counselor. Welcome back to the School for School Counselors podcast. I'm Steph Johnson, your host, back here with you another week to talk about something this week that's a little concerning. As a matter of fact, I have sat on this for a while, just trying to make sure that I wasn't overly emotional about it, that I wasn't too overly invested with it, because it's a big topic. It's a hot topic for our field for sure. And something that I'm surprised and not surprised that a lot of people don't know about. So I'm going to cut to the chase this week. If you don't mind, I'm just going to jump right into it because holy moly, there's a lot to unpack here. A few weeks ago, in one of our mastermind support and consultation chats, we were talking about just some current events going on in our counseling world, about our lack of advocacy. I'm just going to be honest about that, and about where the gaps and the blips and the burps exist. What needs to happen to strengthen our field? What needs to happen to really strengthen the perception of our role on campus versus tear it down? And as we were in conversation about that, an interesting news item came to the forefront. So I want to let you know about it too, because nobody is really talking about this. I don't understand why nobody's talking about this other than the fact that they just don't know. So let me preface it with this. This is me talking about an issue as an outsider looking in. All right? This is some new legislation, some new decisions in a state that I don't live in, that I don't work in, and that I haven't gotten any more information from. So this is just a person from the outside looking in based off of what I've read in press releases, what I've read in reputable news articles, those kinds of things. I'm just going to kind of give you my observations and thoughts on the situation. And then I'm going to leave you to form your own conclusions. All right. This is not campaigning in any way. I don't stand to gain anything by bringing this to your attention other than an effort to just really strengthen our field, our awareness of current events, and to kind of bring some of this stuff on your radar because it's frightening for sure. So I'm going to start by quoting a little bit from a press release that comes from the state of Florida. This press release is dated, let me look and see, October 20th, 2022. All right. So roughly 6 months ago. And the title of the press release is First Lady Casey DeSantis announces Florida is first in nation to reframe and rethink the way mental health is taught in schools. Subtitle: The State Board of Education unanimously approved the First Lady's trailblazing resiliency education initiative. Man, that sounds exciting, doesn't it? Yeah, we're reframing and rethinking mental health, unanimously approving trailblazing education initiatives. But wait till you hear the rest. All right. So let me give you just a little bit about how this information is being put out to folks so you can understand kind of the beginning here. The first paragraph today, First Lady Casey DeSantis proposed and the State Board of Education unanimously approved a groundbreaking shift in how Florida supports the health and well-being of its students. With the approval of a new state education rule, Florida is cementing its first-in-the-nation approach to reframe and rethink the way mental health is taught in schools, shifting from the traditional stigma-laden mental health education model to an empowering new model based on resiliency. Florida is no longer teaching to a disorder. Florida is teaching kids the skills to learn how to overcome challenges. Let's just stop there for a minute. Wow. So, I almost have no words for this. So, a new state education rule. We are going to reframe mental health in schools. Okay, great. We want to shift from a stigma-laden mental health education model. I'm behind that. You guys, if you've worked with me for any amount of time in any of my programs, know that I preach consistently about not pathologizing students in schools. I think that's a real valid concern with the way a lot of districts are doing business. So I get that point. We do not want to teach to stigma. I do take exception to the idea that all school counselors are seeking to diagnose students, because we know we're not allowed to do that. And I also take issue with the fact that anyone is teaching to a disorder. I don't even know what that means. I can't even begin to think of what they're referring to, unless this is some sort of misintentioned bid toward psychoeducation in some way. I really don't know who they've been watching to determine that's what we're doing. But nevertheless, that's what they've asserted. So the news release goes on to say that they're going to be providing updated character education in the form of resiliency standards. Those are going to focus on volunteerism, problem solving, critical thinking, compassion, and grit. All right. And then they're going to spend a whole bunch of money to inform people about resiliency support. I'll get to that in a minute. If I haven't scared the pants off of you yet, I'm about to. A free curriculum. Free, right? It should be great if it's free. And tools created specifically for parents interested in learning what resources are available to help their children. The First Lady says they're going to equip students with skills to help them learn to persevere through life's inevitable challenges. We're going to take negatives and we're going to turn them into positives, is what she's saying. And we're going to empower kids to overcome challenges while recognizing and celebrating the success in doing so. Not all bad ideas. Not all bad ideas. This is my favorite part. No problem is insurmountable. All you need is a little help to become resilient. Friends, I mean, how dismissive can we get? Let's think about all of the issues and concerns that we've had on our campuses this year. And let's see what percentage of those students just needed a little help to be resilient. That's all. No big deal. Y'all, that is very dismissive. I would even say that's a little elitist in its thinking, right? This is obviously not a bunch of people that have worked in high poverty, high trauma situations. These are folks that have not been trying to intervene in some of the fallout from COVID. Quite honestly, I can't even believe they're proposing this post-COVID, but here we are. And listen, as I'm walking through this, I'm not here to knock anybody, but I am going to tell you my concerns, because this is highly, highly concerning. All right, so previously, students in Florida were required to receive classroom instruction, grades 6 through 12, in 5 hours of mental health education and character education. Okay? They did away with that. Now they have this new curriculum that they're implementing, and that's kind of where that press release leaves off. Okay? So aside from my commentary, it's all presented as very first in nation, reframing, rethinking, resiliency, no longer teaching to a disorder, shifting from stigma. This all sounds very fantastic, right? So then let's dive into the particulars of the plan. So we're going to be teaching these characteristics in our curriculum, all right? The key resiliency skills are these: grit, perseverance, gratitude, personal responsibility, volunteerism, critical thinking, problem solving, empathy, citizenship, and honesty. And it says the goal is to impart these skills in the early grades and then support students to implement them as they get older. Not a bad goal. And then they're going to be focusing on some citizenship, mentorship, those kinds of things. Fantastic. All right. Then we're going to provide this new resiliency curriculum, notice nowhere has anyone mentioned who wrote the dang thing. No one's mentioned who has contributed to this. So we're reading with an eye toward that because no one has revealed it so far. Here's where it gets sticky. Casey DeSantis is quoted as saying, "I'm thrilled to see how our efforts to reframe and rethink mental health," there are those words again, "will equip our students and future Floridians to be more resilient. We also know that by incentivizing parental involvement in schools, our students will benefit academically and culturally from the positive influence of mentorship. And as a means to that end, the Department of Education has created 4 pathways for parents to serve in schools and for educators to, I'm just going to say it, essentially try to take over the role of the school counselor. Let me explain what I mean. So, first level is a resiliency coach. And y'all, I am pulling this information straight from one of the Orlando news stations. All right. First step is a resiliency coach. Let's just stop there for a minute. I love how we are equating coaching with counseling. Those are not the same thing. And gosh, I'm trying, as I said, not to take this too personally, but I do take it a little personally when someone equips my clinical mental health education with a coach. I really take issue with that. But all that aside, let's move on. So these resiliency coaches are designed to be a first layer of support for students facing day-to-day challenges. These resiliency coaches can be moms, dads, and community members. They're going to get some training. This is the part that gets me, y'all. Training covering counseling standards and resiliency education standards. And then they're going to be certified as a resiliency coach. What the actual, insert your preferred expletive here. So basically what we've said is we're going to pull mom, dad, anybody off the street that wants to participate. We're going to give them training covering what it took us tens of thousands of dollars and years to attain. Don't worry, it shouldn't have been that hard. We'll do it in a few hours. It's no big deal. It's not like anything you're doing is important, right? That's what I read into it. And again, I may be taking it too personally, but goodness gracious. All right, that's just level 1. That's just level 1 of this framework. So the second pathway is called Certified School Counselor and Endorsement of School Counseling Mentor. Who even knows what that means? That isn't, I cannot read that and understand what that means. So let's go on. It says that these counselors and mentors will support all students in building the characteristics of resiliency. Parents and professionals in the community will be trained in the new school counseling standards as well as the resiliency education standards, in addition to holding state certification. School counselors who plan to oversee the work of a school counseling apprentice may seek the endorsement of school counseling mentor. Okay, let's unpack that one a little bit. It's a little bit confusing, a little bit concerning. So let's see if we can tease out what this means. All right. I don't even know what this means. Parents and professionals in the community are going to be trained in the new school counseling standards, as well as the resiliency education standards, in addition to holding state certification. So this is unclear if this is certified school counselors filling this role, if we are seeking to certify parents and professionals, not clear there. But if school counselors want to oversee the work of a school counseling apprentice, which we'll talk about in a minute, they have to get an additional endorsement because just being a school counselor isn't enough. So think about the double message here. We can train pretty much anybody off the street to do what you do, but for you to oversee it, you're going to have additional certification. Y'all, what is this? What is this? Okay. And then we go on to these school counseling apprentices. So remember, if you're a school counselor and you want to oversee the work of an apprentice, you have to have this school counseling mentor endorsement. All right. The apprentices are going to support students experiencing challenges and in need of additional mentorship. They're going to work under the guidance of a school counselor. They will be trained in all school counseling standards, resiliency education standards, and other topics that would support students in building the characteristics of resiliency. Why? If you already have folks on your campus who are trained to provide mental health intervention, which, by the way, that's not what they're talking about here. They're still talking just about resiliency. Why in the world would you need to go find yourself some apprentices? Is it because you don't have enough folks to fill those jobs? Is it because you don't want to pay for them? What is the reason that you're doing that? No one's explained that to me yet. And then the last one is a resiliency endorsed educator. These educators are going to get additional training on counseling standards and resiliency standards to be endorsed as resiliency educators. That's an additional layer of support for students facing day-to-day challenges. So interesting. So basically what it sounds like to me is we're bringing a whole bunch of extra folks into our schools, and we are giving them some certifications that may or may not be bogus. I'm just going to be honest, and tell them that they are resiliency coaches or school counseling apprentices to handle Tier 1 concerns. Interesting. I'm wondering why. First of all, we're taking people who have really indicated no vested interest in school counseling, and we're educating them on school counseling standards and sending them in as lay counselors. I don't know why you would think that was good for kids. I understand you want mentorship. I understand that you want, folks in your communities and your schools. I don't understand this. It feels a little threatening. And again, I'm going to say I'm emotionally invested in this. I believe in the work that you do every day as school counselors. I know firsthand the impacts that you make. And this concerns me. It also concerns me because these folks, it doesn't sound like, are going to be bound by any code of professional ethics. So what happens when we have moms and dads who sign up to become resiliency coaches because they want to get in the school and hear the kids talk about what's going on, and they want to hear them spill the tea? And nothing for nothing, we have a lot of parents in our schools like that, right? The parents that line up 2 hours before dismissal so they can have the first spot in the pickup line, but can't seem to make it inside to volunteer with the PTA. So I would anticipate a lot of those folks are going to sign up for these slots. The schools who really need mentors, who really need positive adult role models, are usually the schools where parents aren't in a position to volunteer. This is also a little bit of an elitist perspective. Our low income, high poverty, high trauma communities often do not have people who have extra time in their day to be able to come in to volunteer and mentor. So are we going to be unevenly staffed? How are we going to get mentors in the schools with less resources? This is very concerning. And while I can see the need for perhaps some school counseling support, perhaps in the way they're describing a school counseling apprentice, we have an overflow of folks coming out of school counseling master's programs with nowhere to go. I can attest to that myself. We work with them all the time in our Get the Job program, and it's one of the reasons that we created the thing, is because a lot of school counseling markets are saturated, and some folks in some areas don't have anywhere to go to be able to serve as school counselors. Why are we not trying to kind of help incentivize those folks to come into places that need them? instead of bringing a bunch of random coaches and mentors and peoples into our school, which, I mean, again, you want community involvement. I get it. But is this the way to do it? I would much rather have someone certified coming in and working with my student with concerns. That being said, these guys are consistently talking about resiliency education. This is the core of what I see as the problem with this new initiative. Resiliency doesn't solve everything. And even insinuating that it does is so discriminatory towards so many of our students. I'm having trouble finding my words here. It is so dismissive of so many situations. Just be resilient. Just think positive. Just pick yourself up and dust yourself off. This is so demoralizing. If you're in a situation where your parents are addicts, you're caring for your younger siblings at home, you can't do your homework because electricity has been turned off, don't worry about it. You're resilient. Thinking about that now brings me to tears, and you may even hear a change in my voice. What are we communicating to students by telling them, just become more resilient? It makes me think about the students that I've had in my office who have cried and fallen apart, saying things like, why doesn't my dad love me enough to stop shooting up? Why couldn't my mom love me enough to not give me away? And we're going to tell these students, they just need a little more grit. They just need to learn to overcome their challenges. Are we serious? As I'm talking about this, you heard me get emotional. I'm having a physical reaction to this as well. I certainly hope that the way I'm reading into this is not the true intention. It concerns me that we have eliminated the mental health education for Florida students so that we can tell them to toughen up. It concerns me that we are giving the message that all you need is some positive thinking, right? Problem solve your way out of your situation. Think critically about it. Have compassion for others and develop some grit. Wow. Even more concerning than all of that. And again, I hope I'm wrong. I hope someone reaches out to me and says, hey, Steph, the stuff you were saying about the stuff in Florida, you've got it all wrong. You've completely misunderstood what we're doing. I would love for that to happen. I would love to have them come set me straight here on this podcast. Let me know, where do I have it wrong? But in the meantime, let me add another layer of what the heck on top of this. Knowing that this has already been accepted, it's already been approved by the Florida Department of Education and has been for some time. Have you heard anything about it from your national school counseling organization? Nope. I've checked their social media feeds, guys. It's not there. Not saying social media is the best form of news. But if you want to get information out to your folks, that's the way you do it these days. No mention. No mention of that. We have 43,000 people in this organization, and not one word about what's happening in Florida. It says something, doesn't it? I do feel for the folks in Florida right now who are battling this in their own state. The Florida School Counselor Association does have some literature on their website from their advocacy committee about this and are firing back at the new school counseling standards, saying that they don't match state statute, that the state statute lists school counselors as mental health service providers, but the new standards do not, right? Because of this attempt to dilute our roles and function on campus. They go on to give this, and I'm going to quote this. Given their expertise and training in this area, we are doing our pre-K through 12 students a disservice if we do not incorporate mental health services facilitated by school counselors. School counselor training incorporates many of the same classes as clinical mental health professionals, including counseling theories and techniques, human development, group counseling, assessment classes, and an intensive internship process in pre-K through 12 schools. The Florida School Counselor Association Advocacy Committee agrees with the characteristics of resilience as defined in the DOE definition. However, resilience does not address how to support students' mental health issues in schools through resources such as short-term counseling and group counseling, which all certified school counselors are qualified to facilitate as part of their roles. I think that's a really great point. They're trying to point out the distinctions between what we are tasked to do and what this new initiative is trying to box folks into doing or not doing. So it's an interesting conversation. If you're in Florida and you're not active in your school counseling association, get in there. Contact them now. They have a contact us button right there on their homepage. You can click it and it's going to give you all the information that you need. You can fill out a form with your name, your phone, your email, send it to them and say, tell me how to get involved. For that matter, anybody, if you're not involved in your state organization, ask how to get involved, because if this is happening here, it's going to be a matter of time before it's happening other places. I know here in Texas, we're tracking some concerning proposals for legislation. And they are also an attempt to dilute the school counselor's effectiveness. So we got to be careful, folks. We got to stand together on this. So we got to get loud, because so far we haven't been able to organize that quite so well. We got to get intentional about it. So we got some work to do, my friends. Again, I think if I'm understanding this right, Florida is trying to deploy folks to come into their schools to help students with day-to-day concerns. Essentially, they're handing off Tier 1 programming in schools to parents, to community members, to these resiliency educators that they're going to certify, and these school counseling apprentices. And then somewhere along the way in the shuffle, we have school counselors who don't really have an identified role in all of this as far as I've seen, which is concerning in and of itself. But we're going to be educating everybody else on counseling standards. So apparently, my takeaway from all this is anybody can do what you do, school counselors. It doesn't take the years that you put into practice. It doesn't require all of the insights that you've had to develop about yourself and other people, all of the practice, all of the skill building. Anybody can talk to kids. Anybody can talk to kids. There's no need to have a thorough understanding of what's developmentally appropriate, any of that kind of stuff. We'll just send anybody in to talk to them. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Even if we're reserving our school counselors for our Tier 2 and Tier 3 concerns, I still have a real issue with that, and I'm very, very concerned about it. I hope that I've misinterpreted and misunderstood. I genuinely hope from the bottom of my heart that I have. But I still cannot understand why we would seek to disempower the professionals that we already have on campus. And I would wager to say no school counselors were consulted in the development of this. Last, I'll leave you with this little gem. At the bottom of the press release that I led off with in this podcast episode, the resiliency initiative was launched with professional sports teams and athletes who partnered with the state to lend their voices and personal stories of resilience and hope. I sincerely hope that that is not what this curriculum is based on. Because, again, how patronizing. I mean, really. I am all for positive thinking, developing grit. I'm all for these character components. But trauma response is not a lack of character. Trauma response is not a lack of character. And I think that's where we're missing the point here. I don't see in this list of names Orlando Magic, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Miami Heat, Miami Dolphins, Florida Panthers, athletes like Tom Brady, David Beckham, Peyton Manning, Lou Holtz, on and on and on. There's no therapists in here with all of these athletes. And I understand that athletes have to overcome significant mental hurdles in order to be at peak performance. It's not all that's required in our human experience. Because the beauty of the human experience and also the tragedy of it is that we're not all exactly the same. We're not going to respond to situations the same way. We're not going to require the same supports or the same level of support. We all have distinct and unique needs. That is not something that you can learn in an abbreviated course on counseling standards. We're going to be misidentifying a lot of situations. We're going to have a lot of folks involved now that have no idea what they're looking at because you don't know what you don't know when you don't know it. There's going to be a lot more oversight involved on the school counselor's part on their campus, maybe even contributing to even less involvement in Tier 2 and Tier 3 concerns than now. So, like I said, I hope that I'm misunderstanding this. I know a lot of this information that's being published online isn't super linear. It's not making a lot of sense as it's written. But it sounds like we're going to have resiliency coaches, school counselors that have to get additional endorsements as school counseling mentors so that they can oversee the work of school counseling apprentices who are basically laypersons doing a school counselor's job. It makes no sense to me, my friends. I don't understand it. I don't understand the setup, the intention, what anybody is thinking when they're doing this. And I also don't understand why we are not raising more heck about this. And maybe it's because I have misunderstood. Maybe it's because I'm not understanding. But as I've read it and as you've heard it, you draw your own conclusions. Decide what you think about it. Read a little bit more on it. Educate me if I need to be educated. I would love to have the record set straight because as this stands now, it's terrifying. And I don't like it one bit. All right, well, that ended up being lengthy. I was afraid it would be, but I wanted to really lay this at your feet and get you thinking critically, not only about some of the changes that we're seeing, because my friends, Florida is not the only state going after school counselors right now. It defies logic how we could be thinking along these lines post-COVID with all that we know about the social and emotional needs coming out of the pandemic and how much lip service was paid to mental health support. Now, all of a sudden, a lot of states are trying to pull back on that, and that's scary. We got to keep our eyes and ears open. We've got to remain vigilant, and we've got to somehow figure out how to develop a voice. Because if we're waiting on our national organization to do that for us, Y'all, it ain't happening. It ain't happening. And it's probably because they have other fish to fry. So we got to figure out how we're going to get loud, how are we going to advocate, how are we going to inspire positive change instead of this grit and resiliency baloney. All right, that's all I have for you this week. I hate to end on a downer, but I hope you know we're here with you, pushing all the time, supporting you, educating you, and at least trying to empower you through the knowledge of what's going on. So join me again for another episode of the School for School Counselors podcast. Until then, my friends, I hope you do have the best week. Take care.